Welcome back to Blender Cheat Sheets for a follow-on tutorial in this very short series to show you a very simple walkthrough on the functionality that is included in the add-on. If you want to find this add-on, please visit GitHub and look for my handle, DeadDogDown, and you'll find the add-ons that are provided to the Blender community for free. So in this very short and simple tutorial, we're going to be going over primitives. So let me just get this up and centered, and let's give it a very quick walkthrough. This is not going to be super in-depth, super detailed. It's just a very brief intro. One of the things that I'd like to get across to a lot of newbies coming into Blender for the first time. Some of you have guitars, and if any of you have ever read any books by Les Paul, you know that Les Paul has a very wise saying. You don't work the guitar, you play the guitar. So as a newbie coming into Blender, you kind of got to get into the same spirit. You don't work Blender, you play Blender. Learn how to have fun with it before you start to get productive with it. Meaning that if you don't know how to make a box, if you don't know how to modify a box, if you don't know the smaller little things first, you're going to be aiming at making a big complex scene and you don't know the fundamentals or the efficient workflow or even have the muscle memory to be able to do tiny small things. So let me just select everything here and hide it and add to the scene a plane. That's pretty self-explanatory. I could go really silly and really playful right now and add a cube and a circle and a UV sphere and an icosphere and a cylinder and a cone and a torus and a grid and a player capsule and a sun and a point light and a spotlight and an area light. There we go. Boom. Tutorial done. I hope you like that. See you guys in the next one. Okay, no. I'm going to undo all of that. But basically now with all of the buttons in front of you, you don't have to do the brain drain thing. What was that shortcut? Where's that menu? It's all right in front of you. I'm going to give a very short description of what plane is. Plane I like to use a lot, and I'm only talking from my own personal experience. I know there's 1,000 other uses for this, but I like to use plane as a cutter because it can be moved into position very fast. It can be scaled, it can be rotated, it can be set up in a certain way to intersect a specific object. For instance, like if I've got my little cube there and I go to my plane and then I size up my plane, I rotate it around the X, I then select the object that I want to cut, go to modifier, boolean, object, select, I go plane, and there, boom. And then once it's done, I click apply. If I'm happy with it, then I delete the plane, and that is my little disposable cutter. Very nice. Another example is moving on to the next one. I'm not going to stick around with that much because it's pretty self-explanatory. Cube, you all know what that is. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just the main thing is that quite frequently I want to subdivide. So I go into edit mode. So for instance, if I had to give you a visual cue up here, go into edit mode, right click and hit S. Right click S, right click S. Each time I right click S, I'm adding greater and greater subdivisions. And then from there I can start to modify this beast. Press O, press G, Z, reduce the size of the influence circle, and then drag up. Wonderful. Tab out, and there's my final beautiful result. Completely utter meaningless, but I'm having fun. If you don't have fun, you're not enjoying Blender. If you're not enjoying Blender, you're grinding your teeth. Don't grind your teeth. Enjoy Blender first. Learn to play Blender before you learn to work Blender. Okay, the next one is, let's get this one out the way. Circle. Circle is useful for like a number of things. Let's just go into edit mode. It's already quite nicely subdivided. I want to extrude along the Z, and there I've already got the start of a cylinder. I can do a whole lot of other things with that. I can make it into a space capsule. I can make it into a cone. I can make it into an hourglass shape. I can do quite a number of things with this. I'm not trying to be a rocket scientist here. I'm just having fun. The next one is a UV sphere. UV sphere, a very simple way to think of this is as longitude and latitude lines on the surface of the planet. So you'll notice that the longitude lines all come to a intersection at the north and south pole. So you're going to probably use this when you want to map the Earth. But the only problem with this is that you don't get equal distribution of that surface area, because there is greater and greater increased pinching as you get to the north and the south. When you want something that's more equally distributed, like for instance, on this specific kind of sphere, you could easily map a Mercator map of planet Earth, but you definitely wouldn't put the texture of a soccer ball on here. If you wanted to do a soccer ball, then that's not the right sphere to use. You'd probably want to use an icosphere, because with the icosphere, I'm not going to increase the segment size right now. I'm just going to show you, with an icosphere, you've got equal distribution of all faces, which is very useful in certain settings. I'm sure that you can think of 1,001 other uses for this. This is also quite nice if you want to do a very rudimentary modeling of a biodome, because it's already in that classical triangular format. It's not strictly to the design specification of a proper biodome, because that uses a very strict alternating formula between each triangle to make that shape. But this gets you kind of close to the idea. At least visually, it's a very close approximation. It's not technically accurate for a properly constructed biodome. Okay, the next one is cylinder is very useful in a number of ways. If I want to model nuts and bolts, maybe it's a sci-fi hatch on a space station. Maybe it's a capsule in Subnautica. Maybe it's a more optimized cylinder where I don't want too many vertices, but I'm going to obviously shade that smooth, and I can still see, I can still see a bit of edges on that. But you basically get the idea. You can use cylinders for many things. One of the things as well is that many of the times you want to come into face mode up here, and then delete the top face, delete the bottom face, and then start to do work on that cylinder shape. And then only at the end you're going to probably do a grid fill on the end caps. Many ways to skin a cat. Let me think what else I can tell you about this. Cylinder I use quite a lot. This is quite a frequent primitive that I use. Sometimes I want it with lower segments. Sometimes I want it pretty smooth. I kind of go by the judge that depending on what I'm modeling. Let's go back to that cylinder for a moment. I could also go here, obviously. When I want something very smooth, I might go up to 28. It still doesn't quite look right for me. Maybe 32. Up until I get enough of a resolution, 48. 48 looks like it's going to solve it for me in this specific example. Shade smooth. And then basically I don't notice those hard edges. I can still see it slightly, but I might use this as a specific foundation to build an asset. Tunnels, pipes, all sorts of things. Okay, the next one is cone. Cone I've used for modeling a space capsule. I can also use it to create a funnel. So for instance, let's get a little bit funky on this. I'll give you a very short tutorial on how to turn this into a funnel. So on the one side, I'm going to come to face mode there, select that face, delete it. On the other side, I'm going to select that single vertice right at the top, go back into one, vertice select, then let's see, I want my 3D cursor there. So I want to go 3D cursor to vertex, and then I'm going to add, let's see, the cube. I'm going to grab that cube up, but obviously it's now going to be merging with that object which I don't want. So I'm going to quickly, once I've moved it, press P to separate that cube from that object, tab out. Now I've got two separate objects. Right. Now select my object I want to keep, add the modifier, the boolean, press the eyedropper, and select the cutter. And what I should be getting is, let's see if I did that right. Now that top little section has been removed. Now click on the object, go back into edit mode, go back into face mode, select the top face, delete it. Face is now gone. Then, in general, I've got emulate 3 buttons. I'm just going to quickly switch this off. First, edge mode, hold Alt key, and click one of those edges to select that rim. I'm going to just quickly go back into emulate 3 button mode, and I'm going to extrude along Z, and then when I'm happy with that, I'm going to rotate along X, and then I'm going to just do a general scale. And straight away, I've got myself a little siphon or a little funnel. Now, if I want to just finalize off on this, just to show you where this is headed, select everything. I'm going to rotate it around the X 180 degrees. So now you can see this funnel effect that you might have in your kitchen or in your garage. Only thing that would be lacking to make this a little bit more realistic, obviously, is tab out of that while it's still selected, add modifier, go to solidify, and thicken it up to wherever you feel that it should be. And then you'll notice, okay, I'm not too happy with that. That's a bit better. Still not perfectly nice, but I'm not going to get deep into this. I'm just showing you how quickly you can do things out of a simple primitive when you start thinking in terms of what primitive should I be using as a foundation block to get quickly to the shape that I want. So there's a interesting little oil funnel or a gasoline or diesel funnel, a liquid funnel. Throw liquid in the top, and at the bottom it pours out like a spout. Okay, the next one is Taurus. Taurus I've actually found very limited, and that's because, for instance, I can't really make a square-edged gasket with this very well. Even when you knock this down to 4 faces, it doesn't give you quite what you're looking for. There's 3, there's 4. The kind of 4 faces that I'm looking for, if I had to show you that quickly, I'm just going to grab that, move that along the Y so it's out the way, come back here, add cylinder, scale that down on the Z, and then I'm going to add another cylinder, scale it down, and then select what I want to keep, go to modifier, boolean, eyedropper, select what I want to cut with, and then apply. Then when I delete the cutter, the rest should be there. Righto, next is, let's see how far we can get through this next little section. When you want to model terrain, you're going to probably not use plane unless you want to do it the long way. So I could tab in, right-click S, right-click S. Every time I go right-click S, I'm subdividing it smaller and smaller and smaller. Do you see that happening? Now, that's quite tedious sometimes. So what's nice about the terrain grid is that it's already partially subdivided for you. Very cool. And even usable straight away. So if I go into my vertice mode, I'll select one of those vertices, press O for proportional editing, and then grab along Z, and then change the size of the wheel of influence. You can see that I've already got a piece of terrain that I can model to my heart's desire. Right, the next one is very short and simple tutorial. This player capsule. This has kind of become useful for me in two ways. When I want to have a placeholder for a character in a scene, I can do it I can use the capsule, but I can also use this in another way. If I, for instance, in my engine, I'm doing bone rigging and I'm setting up the collision shapes, I actually find using a horizontal capsule is much better for the shoulders, between the left shoulder and the right shoulder, because cylinders and any other shapes, they don't really fit very well between the two shoulders. But if I, for instance, looking along the x-axis, I scale this along the x, I can match this pretty well to the two shoulders, with the neck sitting up here, the chest along the front, the back is here, and the arms kind of coming here and here down the sides. So I found two uses of the capsule, which is very useful. Now, I am going to just leave this in the scene for a moment, because I want to show you now the lights that are easily accessible from Blender cheat sheets. The first, obviously, is a sunlight. You can see straight away. Let me come quickly up to viewport. I'm going to get rid of the grid and the two axes, just so that we can see what is happening here a little bit clearer. And then I'm going to come into my light settings, and I'm going to muck around first with the color. Obviously you're not going to see this because it's not the final render. Oh, there we go. But you can see now I've got a light source, but a sunlight source. Now, what does that mean? The actual sun of our solar system is so far away that for all intents purposes, every single ray of sunlight, you could say in effect for us, reaches us parallel to each other. So there's a certain way that this sunlight in Blender works. It kind of mimics that. So the way for me to show you this is, if I rotate that beam up to face along the y-axis, what do you think will happen to the lighting of that capsule? Do you think that the lighting will fall off completely? Because it looks to me like that single ray of light is pointing down right now. So if I point it that way, then it means that an entire cylinder should fall into darkness. So I'm going to have to rotate it around the x-axis to make it point along the y. So let's see what happens. Rotate along the x-axis. You notice, oh, it's still lit, but now it's not lit in relation to that light source. It's lit in relation to that orange line. So this is a little bit of a tricky thing that some of the newbies have to get used to. This is not a fixed light. This is just parallel rays of light. Doesn't matter where you place this in your scene. What's more important is where you see this and which direction that orange line is facing for you to understand which face of that object is going to be lit. So for instance, if I again go rotate around this way, so it's kind of facing towards the left, you're going to notice that the sun is going to start to come from this side of the object. Am I correct? Look at that. This is parallel light. It's not about the actual icon that represents the light. It's just the generalized idea to represent how the sun works. Now, let's get on to the next one quickly and come back to our material view, and we're going to put in a point light. Point light, if I go now back in here, crank up my wattage, you can see straight away that point light should be omnidirectional. Although it says point, it doesn't mean it's pointing at. It means it's a single point radiating in every direction. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to drag it around, and you're going to see straight away. Now, no matter where the light is, relative to that point of light, that closest surface will illuminate. It's not a directional light like the sunlight. Do you see that clearly? Just have fun with this and practice it and get used to how this works, because it's going to solve a little bit of head scratching. Okay, so now the next one is, let's go to spotlight and see what happens. I'm going to add a spotlight to the scene, and now straight away there's some things that you're going to notice. The first is that there is a kind of a cone effect. Now what does that cone mean? That cone means that anywhere where that cone ends, that's where the shadow is going to begin. Think of this like a torch, the beam from a torch or from a spotlight or from a headlight. It has a very tight field of view or beam. So if I grab this up along the Z, obviously you can't see it now because it's too dim. But now if I grab it along the X, you're going to start to see it being cut off. And that's completely accurate, because anything outside of that cone should start to fall into shadow. This you'll use in a game where you've got a torch model, where you're actually shining at certain areas and you only want that little beam to highlight where you are walking, exactly the same way that you'd have a torch in real life. But there's also another thing that you must remember. Wherever you turn the torch, everything else falls into shadow. Pretty self-explanatory. So practice this. Practice tiny little examples like this and play. Learn to play Blender. Don't work Blender yet. Otherwise, you're going to be driving yourself insane because you're not going to see the results that you want within 5 minutes. There's no matrix in this world. There's no 5-minute upload. I've been learning these things for years. If I had to take the mindset of, oh, I must learn it in 5 minutes, I'd get so depressed I'd want to break my computer and throw it in the trash can. You just can't do it that way. These things take practice, they take playfulness, and with time comes the artwork, the discipline, the craftsmanship. Okay, next one is area light. Now, in my film days, when I was working in the film industry, the best way to explain an area light is kind of like a diffuse light. So when we wanted to soft light a scene, we'd use a area light or equivalent of an area light, a diffuse light. The single hard point light has normally got a much more of a harder effect on a surface. If I had to demonstrate this for you quickly, let's say we quickly hide that area light and we bring back the spotlight. Now, you see how hard these shadows are. Even if you have to move that away to make up the same amount of light, obviously you'd have to crank that up again. But generally spotlights have got a much harder lighting effect. The light is very strong, which means that you can hit your white saturation a lot faster. When you want to get a lot more ambience in the scene, you're going to probably use an area light, which you can configure as a diffuse light. I think this is pretty much it for this tutorial. I hope that you learned a little bit about these primitives and also how to have fun with them and how to play with them. Don't get too technically advanced and locked on your end goal before you've learned to play with Blender. Don't forget to have little 5-minute exercises once in a while, just on completely random stuff that you're going to delete later. It doesn't matter. The main thing is that you get a bit of muscle memory on how to use things, what things do, how they work, so that eventually with your newfound knowledge, you can create more and more complex scenes to get to the end result, which is your artwork, your creation, your game, or your render. Blender Cheat Sheets is free for life. Please feel free to visit my handle on GitHub, Dead Dog Down, and you'll see the add-ons that are provided to the community for free. Don't forget to support Blender, and I welcome your support because this takes an inordinate amount of time to write an add-on like this and to provide it to the community free of charge for life. I'll see you guys in the next one, and in the next tutorial, we are going to be going over object mode and all of the functionality that has been built into this very important tab. See you in the next one and have an awesome day.